Hey everyone, this is Kong with another episode of Should You Summon. As always, I'm going to be presenting high-level overviews to help you decide whether this banner is worth your hard-earned vouchers and crystals. This month's banner continues our journey into the next act of the Langrisser mobile story, with Patricia's dad and Andriole's idol, Emperor Tyrantel, and Eshien's dead brother's fiancé, Tabres. The banner will run from June 27th to July 24th. As usual, any SSR you pull has a 40% chance to be a featured unit, with the remaining 20% chance reserved for any random off-banner unit in the regular summoning pool. Any random off-banner unit. Now, if you've been watching for any length of time, you know I'm all for a grizzled old mythical realm dude, so let's get started with Tyrantel. Tyrantel is Langrisser Mobile's rough photocopy of Bernhardt. In practice, he's an offense-oriented tank. His talent gives him 25% damage reduction. After acting, he can curse an enemy with the opposite of First Strike. In other words, they always attack after their opponent for 3 turns. His talent also has his completely bonkers revive. After he dies, a ghost appears on the field. This ghost can choose a non-summon on your team and turn them into a completely new Tyrantel, which can then act immediately. His 3-cost skill is his Guard. It passively gives him immunity to displacement and immunity to fixed damage all the time. When activated, he also adds 15% of his attack to his defensive stats, increases his Guard range to 2, and replaces this skill with a Sword Soul-like buff stripping attack. If he's post-Ghost, triggering this also lets him move 3 more spaces and act again, which means he can pop his Guard buff as an act again and then immediately kill someone. His other unique skills mainly juice up his offensive potential. One is a passive that increases his normal attack damage by 20% while conditionally decreasing the attack and int of anyone who dares to attack him. And he has a 1.5 times damage attack that passively increases his damage dealt and heals him after combat. He's a member of Empire's Honor, buffed by Bernhardt, Leon, Lance, and Rosenseal, Mythical Realm, buffed by Gizarov, Sage of the Trees, and Isolde, and Langrisser Reincarnation, buffed by Ares and Hilda. For bonds, he doesn't unlock anyone else's bonds yet. He does need Patricia for his own defensive bond, and he just needs to upgrade to one of his classes for his attack bond. Fortunately, we are getting a new Patricia banner during this update. For content, he's on faction for Valkyrie, Fenrir, and Sleipnir, but he doesn't really crack into the meta teams for those. Don't worry though, because I actually like the idea of an offense-oriented tank for just general-purpose PvE. It means everyone can chip in on damage to help clear maps more quickly. His main downside for this function is not having a built-in faction buff. The teammates who make the most sense to buff him in this case would be Isolde or Rosenseal. For PvP, now that tanks aren't as useful anymore, his status as a more offense-oriented tank gives him an edge. For a few seasons now, rush and trade style boxes have had a tank sitting around as a backup just in case they need to soak up a hit from another long-range initiator. If they can bring any additional value of their own, that's great. Landius bringing faction buff was an example for a bit. Lightbringer being able to hold her own in an endgame, and Sissy's disposable tanks while she heals are other examples. Tyrantel excels at this role because when he dies, he essentially turns into a standalone Act Again spell that combos into his 3C Act Again into a big hit. For his build, he's a flyer who can wear heavy gear. Full Moon is his best enchant, Ragnarok is his weapon. Tiamat's Blessing or Last Rites are viable armor choices. People will probably be pretty evenly split on those. I personally like Tiamat. He has a few choices for helms. Fury of Tyr, Flower Bonnet, Njord's, or even Aeneas. Heck, even that Sauron-looking Wrath of the Hierophant would be good on him, since it adds more attack and thus more defense when someone attacks him. That's only on enemy phase though, so I'd probably opt for something more dynamic like the Bonnet. For accessory, we're probably going to go with Bond of Arashi. Okay, let's move on to Tabres. Tabres is an edgy black Pegasus, the dark wings of vengeance. Her talent revolves around her Shadow Feather gimmick. After dealing damage to an enemy, the target gets 2 stacks of Shadow Feather for 3 turns. These can stack up to 3, and every time new Shadow Feathers are applied, the duration is refreshed. So what do Shadow Feathers do? Well, Tabres deals plus 20% damage to any enemy with at least 1 feather. If they have 2 feathers, she can target them with skills anywhere on the map. She just teleports over to the nearest empty space. If they have 3 feathers, they can't counterattack against her. Her 3C stacks 2 Shadow Feathers on an enemy whenever they kill one of her allies. When used actively, it's a 0.15 times AoE in an area around her that also heals allies, gives her a little sword breath-like auto AoE around her before acting for 2 turns, and lets her move 3 spaces and act again. These little piddly AoEs are really just a way for her to spread some Shadow Feathers around. She also has a skill that gives a selected ally the ability to apply 1 Shadow Feather after dealing damage. Using this also triggers a self-hide that makes her untargetable by normal attacks or skills for 2 turns if she's above 80%. Finally, she has a single target assassination skill. If there are more living enemies than allies, and this doesn't include NPCs or summons, then this skill ignores guard, and if the target has 2 Shadow Feathers, it attacks the hero directly, ignoring troops as well. She's a member of Meteor Strike, buffed by Zerida and Epsilon, Strategic Masters, buffed by Altamüller, Lanford, and Grenshiel, and Princess Alliance, buffed by Luna, Shelfaniel, and Christiane. For bonds, she doesn't unlock anyone else's bonds yet. She does need Eschian for her own defensive bond, and Hoffman for her attack bond. Hoffman is back on a Destiny banner with Wandering Duelist and Nymph this month, but you'll have to wait till August for an Eschian rerun. For content, in PvE, she's on faction for Leviar, Scylla, and Phoenix in the Eternal Temple, and Jormungandr, Sleipnir, and Nidhogg in Ancient Beckoning. Despite the big menu, she's not really a leaderboard contender for any of these. She's a little problematic in run-of-the-mill PvE as well. In order to be really effective, there needs to be a lot of Shadow Feathers around, but if she's in a position to give enemies Shadow Feathers, they're probably either a thick boss or already dead. So she's definitely designed more with PvP in mind, but even there she's more of a niche option. She could be a good late-game assassin or a trade unit, staying out of enemy range and threatening her teleport plus assassination combo. Sadly, this strategy means you're already down units, which means she's kind of reactive. She also doesn't have a revive to protect her after jumping in like Zerida does. In this sense, I kind of see her as similar to Wandering Duelist, where in a trade scenario, she's going to be able to get an easy kill against someone who's already charged in and killed one of your units. For her build, she's a flyer too. She doesn't necessarily need Breeze as much because of her teleport, but it's still okay for damage. Clock, Full Moon, and Meteor are all valid options. She likes Crimson Reaper for more damage spikes, or Ragnarok for straight up assassination. She would also want Last Rites and the new butterfly accessory. If you're not a whale and don't have any butterflies, then I'd rather go with an attack boosting accessory or Twilight Star rather than Bracer, just to increase her assassination potential. In fact, without Bracer, Last Rites may not even be that great, so you could give her something like the Glimmering anti-AoE armor. Hopefully her unique ends up being an armor piece. I've seen the new AoE boosting Owl Hat recommended, but in my opinion the real purpose of her AoE is to spread Shadow Feathers rather than inflict serious damage, so I would just as soon go with something like Flower Bonnet on her. That said, if you have Owl Hats lying around and no other AoE focused units in your box, like Nemia, then you can go ahead and put it on her. Alright, let's move along to the notes for noobs. Tyrantel is a great offense-oriented PvP tank with a neat revive and act again mechanic. If you don't PvP, he's still okay and a cool-looking unit, but not a must. If you do PvP, then go ahead and summon him. Tabres is also for PvP, but she's more of a niche pick. For most people though, she'll have more waifu appeal than Tyrantel. For most people. Finally, just my usual reminder about upcoming banners. First of all, there are 1 to 3 important upcoming resource syncs to think about depending on which characters you need for bonds. The Patricia banner for Tyrantel's bonds is next week, and the Hoffman banner for Tabres' bonds is later in the month. Plus we have the Hopes and Dreams lotto to unlock Lanford's SP upgrade next week. If you don't have Lanford yet, he's conveniently on a banner with Shelfaniel and Virash at the end of the month. Next month's major update headliners promise to be even more meta-defining than this one. Tyrantel is a great PvP option that a lot of people are going to use, but next month's Celica... No, not that one. Celica is a bananas unit who does bananas stuff. We'll talk more about her in her own episode. Anyway, that's it for this one. My hope is to pull one Tyrantel this week, and then one Patricia next week. If I get a copy of Tabres for collection purposes, that's good, but if not, it's not the end of the world since I'm back to tightening my belt on this game. My new camera gear is not going to purchase itself. Let me know what your summoning plans are in the comments below, or as always on This Old Neon's Discord, where I'm always hanging out and chatting about sometimes Langrisser, sometimes not Langrisser. Link is in the description. Give me a thumbs up when you're down there. Thank you so much for watching, and extra special thanks of course to our Langrisser tier channel members, Levitt, Kate Soon, and Jerome Meyer, for generously supporting this channel directly. I wish you all the best of luck, and I will catch you in the next Should You Summon.